Let me
All
see
this
my
content at
camera.
this minute. I just changed your name for you. Etienne's coming in. Better record this as
Not
well.
live? Yeah.
Um, there must be a way for me to record this. Oh, there it is. There we go. All right, I think we're good, guys. Let me just
Turn on the YouTube.
a little introduction. Are we on YouTube?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, then I will do a quick little introduction, which is welcome, everybody. We are here in Edmonton, Alberta for Hash Church 5.0, episode 8. I literally just landed a few minutes ago. I wasn't sure how many people were going to be around. I wasn't sure which guys were going to be gung ho and which others might be confused. But thank you guys for making it out. We got Chimera Etienne and Skunkman Sam in here today, and it's a little bit later than usual. I guess a couple of hours later than what we normally do. There's Corey, just inviting Corey from Sample Automation. He's the guy that created the Rosin Reactor for decarbing live hash rosin and other resins. Say shout out to everyone that is in the YouTube chat right now. Looks like we have a few folks. Got to get this a little wider. Maybe the chat will show up on the other side. Let's see what we got here. How we doing, guys?
Well,
Doing good. Did everybody get in their DEA for testifying in time for the rescheduling petition? I did. I hopefully I'll get selected to testify. Tell them to their face their lies and misinformation.
That would be a mistake on their part.
Well, whether I get selected or not,
This guy looks good. Etienne Fontan. Yeah, he seems just like a regular guy, veteran. Yeah, let's bring him on. He probably won't be too pro.
How times have changed that we're calling up the DEA and requesting to be testified.
Dude, are you
I
fucking
know,
kidding
right?
me, bro?
The absolute opposite of anything of the etiquette that we were taught to even do or ever consider. Now
Yeah.
that we're in a new landscape, this is part of the eternal vigilance of being an American citizen is you have to interact with your system. Otherwise, as we say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I'd rather be at the table than be on the menu. So those who are paying attention, this is the price. You have to step up, you have to speak out, you have to step way outside your comfort zone, which is something that, all of us have been fucked with or busted by the DEA. The last thing you're expecting is, I'm going to go down, sit there in front and testify and tell them what I think. And
yeah, exactly. Wild.
people were in an unprecedented situation. We have foisted this drug war on you, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I spoke with the White House this week, the State Department, and the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, because I work at the UN level and the national level. So believe it or not, as my friend Michael Crowitz says, it's oddly enough, I have to go all the way over to Vienna to meet all the people from the US delegation. But doing enough of that, we have put ourselves at the table, and they made us aware that they're anticipating this to go weeks, plural, because they're anticipating reading all 40,000 of those comments and then testifying. So it's going to be a long, unprecedented process. On top of that, the State Department kind of asked us, well, why is there, we added harm reduction to the language, which people have to understand. It took a long time, and I'll explain how long it took just to get the words harm reduction added. Okay. Now, the US was like, well, why didn't it land well? Why weren't we getting pats on the back from, all the other countries? And I basically broke it down simply. It took you finally, everybody was happy that you inserted the verbiage harm reduction. Everyone's upset that it took 24 years to get it inserted. Do you get it? And the light clicked on for them. They understood, but they understand that they're in, again, an unprecedented situation with this rescheduling situation taking off, that it's its own administrative situation. They do anticipate people like Kevin Sabet and others to, you know, do their best to cock block the situation and throw some lawsuits in the way to try to slow it down as best as they possibly can. But we're there and going to be dogging his ass and staying on top of it to flip that script. So the US government is shifting its priorities, but they also let us know that there's nothing, they don't really know anything. These are all government people. They're going to have to wait until the election to figure out which directive they're going to and towards. They do anticipate in Vienna they're going to continue to push for going after synthetics, but besides that, they really don't know much at this time, except that rescheduling is coming down the pike. We have engaged them trying to create a cannabis committee, a national cannabis committee, the same way that the Dutch have done when they did their medical cannabis. So we're pushing to and toward that, as well as we push policy forward. As we anticipate, as we state, we're working towards 2030 to legalize worldwide, and we are on track. And these types of discussions continue that, as well as the State Department and the White House like that we work at all different levels, so they feel that they can put heads together with us on these situations first. So we're just going to continue to sit at the table and continue to have these discussions and move the needle forward.
Figure out how to do it.
We're trying, Sam. Y'all laid the groundwork. We're just trying to follow up and free the rest of the world so y'all can do what the fuck you want to do with cannabis. Love you.
I'm having trouble with my camera.
I think your camera blocker is slid over across the screen.
Yep.
I like that Ryan can troubleshoot from thousands of kilometers away. Is like, I have an idea of what's going on over there right now.
There you go.
Called it.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
When I was there, I
That's
upgraded Sam from the masking tape to a little. Yeah, I left him a few of those.
That's awesome, dude.
You see, it's not quite perfectly positioned, but it's a step up.
Well, welcome to Corey in from Sample Automation. Good friend and good dude that's created the Rosin Reactor, the little decarb unit. So we're going to have some questions for him today, and I'm sure Dr. Mark will love to get into it with you, Corey. Just wanted to welcome Dr. Mark as well. Good to see you guys. This is a little bit later of a hash church. I'm here in Edmonton, Alberta. It's popping out there right now, so I'm missing a lot in Edmonton just being here at the Hash Church panel. But no, that's a little bit of an Edmonton joke. It's Canada, it's good vibes, and so yeah, Corey, welcome, dude. What's going on over by you? You're on the east side, right?
Yeah, I'm on the southeast, so I'm out here in Central Florida. Had that hurricane a couple days ago, but we're relatively high and dry in the center of the state, so doing all right. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Long time, fan. Got the old throwback vintage stitched bubble bag shirt here.
Nice.
Used to wash with those bags up in a cabin like a decade ago, and happy to see it kind of come full circle and be part of the community and keep pushing some tech forward. So yeah, I've been busy last year or so working on the Rosin Reactor. Don't have one here to show you guys, but maybe later I can log in. We've got an actual run going live in Michigan for Papa Sift and Ryan up there. So maybe you could show that data and see it live sometime. So, but yeah, happy to answer any questions and be a part of the discussion in the community.
Yeah, dude, glad to have you, dude. I've I used the Rosin Reactor in a few of my labs down south, and we had the one up in Canada as well, and it just a nice simple little unit that helped get the job done. It seemed like it was a hole that didn't seem to exist, and watching bubbles and the whole, there's subtle nuances to decarbing, particularly, and I think it was you that told me that it was that last 10% of decarb takes like a chunk of time. And when you're just watching bubbles, the bubbles can be stopped for that last 10%. So now you have to like guess this timeline of like, is it going to be like 3 more hours or 4 more hours or like, so yeah. And then of course, when we got our first one, I was stoked how you were monitoring it because you've got it set up so you can monitor this thing from your phone, which I have to say, Andrew, your CEO came over and he was the one that set it all up and we worked it together. We ran, I don't know, like a kilo batch or something of live hash rosin. And the first day we set it up, there was a problem. Something happened. At first, he thought that it was so terpy that the solenoids were like sealed shut and weren't able to open and burp out that CO2.
Right.
And but you realized it before we did, or maybe it was Andrew, I can't remember. It was one of you guys monitoring it and was just like, oh, it's pressurizing, it's not releasing, I'm just going to shut it down manually. So it showed me that ability to be able to monitor it, be away from, and it was, from your guys' perspective, Andrew was like, oh God, like I can't believe it happened on the first. I'm like, dude, that was perfect. I love to see shit like that because now how fast can you fix it? And he Legoed that thing, like pulled out the fucking brain, put in a new brain, shut it up, and we were decarbon like the next day. So it showed me how easy and how well I can monitor the unit. So it's a kind of a big deal to me in the cannabis industry now. Every little advantage you have, to me, the advantage is, are you growing the right genetics? Have the right people done the breeding work for the genetics that you're going to want to grow? Because it's not like, oh, I can't get my plant to smell like that. Well, it's like, is it because those gene synthases aren't even present? Is it because you didn't grow the cannabis well enough? Is it? So let's take care of that first. And then every advantage I can find down the line before I get my product to a market is to preserve those volatile organic compounds. That's like job number one. So I like the way the rosin reactor does that. It decarbs it in a very accurate amount of time where I don't have to cut it early and worry about like micro inclusions of crystallization fogging out my carts, and I don't have to worry about going hours over and potentially burning off volatile organic compounds. I also did appreciate how the volatiles seem to precipitate, volatilize and then precipitate back into a liquid on top of the jar and then sort of reflux back down into there. Because yeah, for me, not enough people are growing good enough cannabis in the first place. To have no cold chain in the whole market is also like another like volatile organic just killer. And then to be just like, well, we're just decarbonating ovens and watching for the bubbles. It's just like, holy shit, man, this shit adds up. Like you might have had 3 or 4% or 5 or 6% prior, and now you're down by half or whatever because you didn't do things correctly. So I'm stoked to have you on here, dude. And obviously we'll talk about all sorts of things today, but when we can and we have questions about the rosin reactor, we'll talk about that as well.
Absolutely, all about the terps, and like you said, every strain is different, so it's really, adjusting to, no single recipe is going to be the best, so you got to be able to watch it, the differences.
You know who loves hearing that? CFOs.
Yeah.
They love hearing that you can't just standardize it and that it's just not going to be the same every time. It's going to be different every time. No, but we need to make it the same. Like, what about making it the same? That's why I think go ahead, Etienne.
Corey, I got a question for you. Are there certain genetics that people have found that work better than others, or certain types of phenotypes that you find tend to work better in the machine than others that people could be aware of?
So we found that like one of the variables would be, not only your terpene content, but maybe the moisture content on a very, very small level can affect that reaction rate. The primary driver is your temperature, but again, some of those other, cofactors can play into play. We've also done, BHO decarbs, and we see, higher THC content, rosin or resin or concentrates. We just require more heat energy, essentially. So that's either you got to turn up the heat or give more time to complete your reaction. So, but as far as genetics, our goal is to just keep that exact profile the same, keep the terp profile the same in the same proportions, so that when it's decarb, it doesn't lose anything and it tastes the same in a cart as it would a dab, that's been the the prevalent thought is that, oh, you degrade the quality when you decarb, and we're trying to say, no, you don't have to,
Very good, very good.
Great
Well,
question.
I'm thinking it might be time for a little dab here. I've got the classic little shower cap covering the fire alarm. Remember to put the the cap on the fire alarm when puffing lightly in your hotel room, but also make sure you take it off, because they do have strange questions for you when you leave it on. After you've left the room, they'll have some curious questions for you.
By the way, that works on airplanes too. Not that I would ever recommend it.
I would never do that either, but it does work.
That's an interesting rumor.
Yes.
I like
one
rumors.
day. Well, today I was on the plane with Air Canada, and they said, and I've got my broken arm, I'm like, oh, I should be able to eat a gummy or whatever. And I'm about to eat the gummy, and the lady announces, oh, there's no cannabis use on the plane, like whatsoever. No gummies, no beverages, obviously no vaping, no smoking. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that must be a recreational rule. Right after she announced that she'd be coming through the cabin with an alcohol cart to get everyone all hammered up on the juice. And so I was like, okay, that's fucking weird. So I pulled her aside and I was like, hey, I'm a medical patient. So not a recreational patient. And obviously I can eat a gummy. My arm's broken. I'm in pain. It's my medicine. Like, I'm just going to eat a gummy. And she's like, oh no, sir. You would have had to have contacted Air Canada ahead of time, gotten permission from Air Canada. And I was thinking, this must be a breach of the Charter of Rights. Could you imagine asking if you could inject insulin on the plane, but there's no syringes allowed on the plane? And so you're like, yeah, but I'm a diabetic. I'm like, I need to have insulin in my body. So she told me I could not take this gummy. And in fact, also told me, this was the mind blower. This was mind blowing. She told me that if I wanted to eat a gummy, sorry, I'm just going to make sure my plug is working here so the whole computer doesn't shut off. If I wanted to eat a gummy, I would have to bring another person on the plane with me to take care of me from the gummy. This is what she said to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? Exactly, Etienne. I was just like, are you
They're
fucking kidding me?
presuming your gummies are incredibly powerful.
No, that's
Oh,
a
geez.
that's a violation of international law. And actually, I did engage the State Department regarding this, because I made them aware that ignorance of the law does not protect them. And they were like, what? I was like, international law changed in December of 2020. Michael Crowitz and my friends did that. And therefore, medical cannabis is legal worldwide. So it's going to take people like you and me forcing them into that change, because you can contact Air Canada, Marcus, and state that this is the law and you're violating international law. Does my lawyer need to have a debate with you regarding international law in a courtroom? Because we're more than happy to go there. So therefore, your policy is illegal, and therefore you are not protected even by your company, which you could have told that flight attendant, right? And that's the same thing.
It didn't sound right, dude. Didn't sound right.
That's the same thing that if your stuff was seized on a cruise ship, you could tell them that what they have done is piracy. They have stolen your medicine that you use in your private residence that is legal under international law, and therefore you are protected for your use the same way as you stated, as an insulin patient, etc., etc. It's just that people have not taken their cojones out and forced the issue, which is something I am now making everybody aware, because I made the
I'm going to do it.
aware.
I'm going to do it.
You have that right. It is international law. And by breaking international law, they are now liable. You can take them to The Hague.
Oh,
I know.
Take Air Canada to The Hague.
No, you take KLM.
Yeah, you're right. He's right. In fact, most of the Air Canada flights to Holland are run and operated by KLM. So they'll have
But
to.
You set precedence with one airline, and then you can take that precedence to the other. It's the same way when we got ourselves
Holy
declared
shit.
as emergency people here when the pandemic happened in California. We were all made illegal, but I and my employee Sabrina, we were able to get paperwork from a precedence from San Diego County that stated that they were going to declare their dispensaries as emergency workers, and we took that paper, went straight to Sacramento, which is the state capital in California, for those who don't know, and lobbied the state, and the state said, "You're right. There is precedence there, so therefore all medical dispensaries are protected." And then what we started there rippled throughout the rest of the United States. So see, it just takes sometimes one person doing something. One of the other things I've done along the way to set precedents, but that you can do to change the law, because international law is now wrong. And as they have told us for decades, their ignorance of the law is no protection from them. In fact, they're the individual can be sued, and their companies can abandon them because they have broken international law, even though it's the rule of the corporation. Such as if the captain were to seize my stuff on a ship, I could declare that captain as a pirate and that ship as piracy outright, because they're breaking international law. And to break any law at water is piracy. So I know it's a big word to use, but you are protected by international law and your local law, Marcus, because international law says that it is legal medicine, and your country says it's legal medicine, and all of your provinces you travel to are medicine. So therefore, you have every right to not only have access, but to use your medicine.
Dude, I'm telling you, that sounds right. And what she was telling me sounded wrong today. What I probably need to do is get them recorded saying this to me, or get
No,
them
it's
on an
policy. If
email.
you go look up Canada has a policy. Now you can take that get that policy, because they can't just orally do a policy. If you look, it's a
Right.
policy, and now you can hold them accountable by international and national law and
Damn.
push the issue and literally change the law for all Canadians, which would then set other precedents for us in other countries to do so, because your human rights and your patients' rights were violated by them denying you access to your medicine. Plain end of simple. As you stated, if you were an insulin and you were having a diabetic situation, it is no different. And you are protected by that law. It's just nobody has taken it there yet. So everybody watching, fucking use your fucking rights and your voices.
Yeah, I just thought it was hypocrisy when they were like, you can't use any cannabis, medical or recreational, but we'll be coming around the cart right away with
You
some
should have
fun
said too
alcohol
late.
I
juice.
hate to say it,
Too late.
but it's better to use the shower cap and lift up the drain lid in the bathroom. That's worked for me for decades.
It has, and it is a great way to do it. But this is just like, I was just gonna.
No,
And in the end, I
Sam,
did.
if we considered and we continue to do that, then the status quo happens and other patients continue to get harmed. Where does it finally? It's like, I got tired of being a criminal
well,
and making criminals out of my friends. So that's why I got and sold cannabis. So it's the same way. We eventually have to come out of this.
The advantage to it, Etienne, the advantage is that it's kind of like when you smoked a doobie in high school in the bathroom. It gets you higher.
I understand that, but my social justice.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm as you know, just the joker who's a smoker.
Well, it's your jingles in you. It'll never go away.
It's funny because we had to keep our lab open in Nevada during the pandemic and COVID, because everyone in cannabis in Nevada was considered essential to keep that industry open and keep the medicine going to the patients. So I guess I have you to thank to make me keep my job and keep working through that.
That was the same case here in Canada. And
Yeah.
once again, just like the Air Canada hypocrisy, they were like, we're going to allow the cannabis stores to stay open because they're essential, producing medicine, etc. And then the health lady, Bonnie Henry, she came out and she was like, we're also going to leave all the liquor stores open. And she said, not because they're essential, but because the alcoholics will fill up the ICU beds if we don't give them access to alcohol. And I was just like, holy shit. How fucking mental and insanity is that? That alcohol is such a dangerous drug that just stopping access for people in the city during COVID would have filled the ICU beds with people going through withdrawal. I just couldn't believe that. It was like a public statement made right on the news. Like, all right. Seemed pretty crazy. How you doing, Wade? We can't see you.
Love you, Wade.
Hey there. I'm I'm a bit ragged at the moment. I'm gonna be on camera in a couple of minutes. Bear with me. It's been a rough week, but I'm in good spirit. Big love to all of you.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, Wade. We're one of the main reasons I love to join every week is to hear from you, is to hear from Sam, is to just not take for granted that you guys are here for us to access, anytime we want. I'm like, okay, well then let's access it. Let's get those stories out. Let's get hanging out. Let's share vibe with one another. You always make me feel good with your stories. They always, fuck, you threw me off the other day with the picture of you and Richard Nixon. I'm still reeling from that one. That was a wild, it's just neat to get to know people better and to share things that are just parts of our lives and milestones and different things that happen to us. It paints a very unique picture. So I appreciate that we've been getting into a little bit of that as of late.
Well, I have so much love and respect, Marcus, for what Hash Church is to me and this community, our culture. This is a big part of keeping our culture in our awareness. I've really been digging into my feeling of the network of consciousness that links us all together, that links us to the plants, links us to the rocks. Been doing a deep dive on that one. Like I said, feeling kind of ragged this morning. I'm getting my shit together. I'll see you in there shortly. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Very good. Well, if you get your camera working, we'd love to see you. And then don't forget about your mic too. Your mic that you're using right now is probably from your headphones, so it's a little bit muffled, but we'd love to hear from you as clear as possible.
Yeah, it gets a little muddy, Wade. I understand that's what you have, but if you have the availability to go without that, we can just hear you a lot clearer.
And I have a question for you, Etienne. Who's the most famous politician you've ever discussed cannabis with?
The most famous politician I've discussed. I've talked to I've talked to like 50 or so. So it's hard to say one. And I mean, I and I talk about cannabis, and I've talked cannabis with. Barbara Lee, who's my representative here in the Bay Area. I talked to her and feedback to her a lot because she has stood up for us when we were forcefully evicted back in 2012 through the government and won. She gave us, she was the first congressperson to recognize us for our 15th anniversary. She did a congressional commendation, which is she basically read a speech acknowledging us and what we do in Congress, which is about as high an honor as you can possibly get, given the legality of it being, in the US. And then she did it again for our 20th. And she just contacted me. They're people this weekend because we turn 25 next month. So she's asking because she's probably going to show up, and we look forward to it. But I've never talked to Al Gore, possibly, but that's back when he was the governor of Tennessee still. When I went off to war for the Gulf War, I happened to be at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is on the Kentucky and Tennessee borders. So I got to hear two governors put me to sleep with speeches. Go, well, thank you very much for your service and good luck out there and go die happily. You know, just dumb shit that you're just like, you know.
With me, it was quite a while ago. I I was flown in to talk to Joshua Elders, the attorney. I mean the Surgeon General.
A former Surgeon General. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, before she got approved in Congress, they flew me in because they were worried that she was being public about her saying that cannabis is good for medicine, and but it turned out that it wasn't based on a scientific decision as
Right.
much as compassion. So that made her, compassion is, it's hard to criticize compassion.
Well, I mean, we've hosted. I mean, when I was at the National Cannabis Industries Association, which I was a founding board member of, you know, we would host. I mean, the last time we had in 2019, we hosted 20 different politicians from Katie Porter to, you know, Blumenauer, amongst others, and they came to our event. So that shows the difference where in 1994 was the first time I went to lobby on Capitol Hill, and it was with Dr. Todd McCurria, rest in peace, and Dennis Peron, rest in peace. And if you know both of them, they are kind of the Dr. Todd McCurria was the psychiatrist, and of course Dennis Peron changed the face of cannabis. So,
Well, Todd McCurria was also, he was the head of the Marijuana American Institute for the
yes,
American government for a while. I mean,
correct.
I knew Todd very well, and I also knew Dennis quite well.
And Dr. Todd was my doctor because I was the first Desert Storm veteran that he had to study regarding medical cannabis. So when I originally, in fact, just so everybody knows, if it hadn't been for Dr. Todd McRae, I probably wouldn't even be here in cannabis now, because when I moved in 92 to the Bay Area in the spring of 93, the first Cannabis Action Network meeting, Dr. Todd spoke, and he whipped out his book, which, if anybody doesn't know, if you can look it up, it's the Medical Marijuana Papers. It's like the 1880s to like 1974, and it's all the government research regarding medical cannabis that he compiled. So he was absolutely stellar, great
Uh, he
communicator.
he
And
he
then
had his history and his references down to, he
he was a
understood
genius.
it backwards and forwards. He also was very interested in the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission report. He wrote a book about those also.
Well, and the cool thing, well, why I said cool thing is he also taught us and kept us, because when I met him, he was finally in his 50s. And he had started what was called Be Cool, the Berkeley Cannabis Ordinance Oversight League. Be Cool. Because back in 1979, the city of Berkeley actually, the lady who would become mayor actually raffled off a kilo of cannabis to get people to register and to vote for the measure, which in 1979 made cannabis the lowest priority for police, so that if anything is happening, that police should be going and dealing with that and not dealing with cannabis. And what he did is he became the oversight. So any records that would come out from Berkeley that said there were arrests, he would then go down to the city council and says, hey, your ordinance says you should be prioritizing other things, and here you are arresting people. And so that was the Berkeley Cannabis Ordinance Oversight League. So that was one way where he was plugged in at the local level, making sure that cannabis arrests were not happening. And of course, when he took me lobbying, that
Yeah.
was at the national level. And let me tell you, the dynamic between Dennis Peron lobbying and Dr. Todd McCurria lobbying when we went into Senator Waxman's office at the time was absolutely mind-blowing, because Todd's in a suit, dressed up nice. I'm in a suit for the first time in years with a tie. Dennis is in, a nice shirt, and jeans, and he immediately goes and puts his feet back, puts his feet up on Senator Waxman's desk, and he's like, "How's it going, motherfucker?" And I'm like, this is not what they taught me in civics class. Starts blaring through my head, and they start laughing and talking. Dennis takes his feet off, they shake hands and have a good old time. And of course, Dr. Todd is very formal. Hello, just so it's just mind-blowing to have that type of experience the first time lobbying for cannabis. So I would say back then, Senator Waxman, because of how the dark ages of cannabis were at the time, but to do it with those two characters as the young combat veteran showing up as a medical patient was chef's kiss fun.
He was
Short
a
story.
congressman, right? He wasn't a senator, I don't think. He was a congressman.
Then he was a congressman, and I'm
Yeah.
old. I'm old. That was 30 years ago. So
Yeah, wasn't he like Beverly Hills? Like he's where Adam Schiff is, I think. Right? Beverly
probably.
Hills.
I don't recall. I just remember he was, this is my first time there. I happened to be there. We were all back then, a thing called the Drug Policy Alliance or the Lynn Smith Center would have a kind of a national gathering in DC. So basically all the US activists would come to DC. And while we were there, that's when, Dennis and Jack kind of came to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Todd and Dennis are going to go down, and you should, because you're a young guy and a veteran and just came back, and we think you'd be a good voice." I'm like, "Okay, point me in the direction." And so I wasn't really understanding of who was where. They're just, "We're going to Congress." Okay. I was just, they passed me the joint. I got the joint, showered, put on the suit. So I smelled nice, and that smelled like the joint. And off we went. And yeah, it was literally one of those kind of whirlwinds where just like, I can't believe I'm in this office. How did the fuck did I get here? It's one of those many Forrest Gump moments I found myself in over the decades. Like, how the fuck did I end up here? Oh, okay, here I am. When Dennis and Jack come to you, because we're all staying at Steve D'Angelo's house, when Jack Herrera and Dennis Peron come to you and say, "We want you to do something," you kind of have to, right?
Let's do it.
Who's going to say no?
You met the Wax Man. I actually also had the pleasure of meeting the Wax Man. God, I think this was like in 2014. Went there with Jehan Marcoux and a couple other cannabis people. I can't remember exactly the circumstances, but yeah, right at the end of his congressional stint. But I don't know. Did he do anything meaningful before he left?
No, it was just, again, it was Dennis keeping tabs on, and they were both Californians, so they were
Right.
just checking in with their California constituency is what I see in the end, because that why Jack and Dennis, we were all together. That's that picture where I'm sitting in between Jack and Dennis, as they finally decide that Dennis is going to run Proposition 215. It was really kind of a constitutional situation for the cannabis community in the sense of who was all in the house. It was Dennis Peron, Jack Herrera, Debbie Goldsberry at Steve D'Angelo's house, with Richard Davis and LV Musica. So it's literally a who's who of everybody who helped move and shake. And of course, those were the people that Steve D'Angelo would invite over to his house, because Steve was the dealer in DC and always had the best weed. And we always knew we'd go to the place that always had the best weed. And Dennis, of course, always went to the place who had the best weed, because Dennis always had the best fucking weed. That was end of story.
What year was that, Etienne?
94.
94.
Yeah, because then they would decide that they would then go have those discussions. Dale, Geringer, Ellen, all these people in California that would then create Proposition 215, and then the initiative would go forth in 95 to get it on the 96 ballot, right? So it was literally that, and of course then Proposition 215 happened, because you have to understand, people, Jack Herrera's initiative was like 17 pages long. It called for reparations, the whole 9 yards. He wanted everything back that was taken away regarding cannabis, where Dennis is like, I just want a simple one pager, just medical marijuana. And it was pulling teeth until we finally got Jack to capitulate. And it took, a lot of talking and cursing, because Jack is a very strong-willed, and he had done his initiative the past, decade plus. So for him to give up his baby was not something easy to do. And it took quite a few activists convincing, and I happened to be there right at the tipping point.
Well,
So
one of the things about Jack's initiatives is he never passed one.
correct. And Dennis ran his first one and won. And Dennis had
No, you
cred.
got to be realistic.
Dennis Peron, for those who don't know, he survived the Tet Offensive, then would open the Big Top in San Francisco, which is basically an open air market in his house, where you came in and there would be kilos laid out with pre-rolled joints that you would then sample what you wanted, and they basically would then weigh it out. The San
Also,
Francisco
hash and mushrooms.
and hash and mushrooms. And the police busted in and shot him, and literally stood over him as he was bleeding out and said, "We shot this faggot." And pardon my language, but that was the language used. And Dennis went to court, sued them, and won. But at the same time, the Big Top never reopened, and he literally took a bullet for the movement, and has always been, in my opinion, one of the heroes. So when AMVETS, one of the larger veterans communities, decided to give out a cannabis award, they named it the Dennis Peron award, and I was the first male recipient of it, which was, I was beyond honored. And it's a cool
And
wooden
then
pot leaf.
after Big Top, he opened up I guess, which was probably the first true dispensary.
Correct. And that was the most important dispensary. Dennis's original dispensary. It wasn't on Fifth Street. It was off, because back then I used to deliver the clones to him. So that's how I knew where it was, because I was working for Ed Rosenthal as his GM. So I would deliver the clones. And then when they moved to the Market Street, which was what the feds would call the 5-story felony, that was the most important dispensary, because all the other dispensaries, the original 7, which was Jeff Jones and others, they were the first one shut down in 97, when the federal government basically came forward and said, if y'all don't shut your doors, we're going to kick in your doors and your heads. And everybody shut down.
The other model that did very good was Valerie Corral in Santa Cruz County.
And that was different. They were collectives. And so
yes,
they were the
absolutely.
true collective. And that collective was the true spirit of Proposition 215. Dispensaries were not part of the original 215, just so everybody is aware. If you're not, you should be, because what we did when we opened in 99 was illegal, and it would be many years until we would change the law under Senate Bill 420 that would make dispensaries legal. So we operated illegally. We expected to be arrested every single day. I hired activists back then, because we were expecting the DEA to kick our doors in. And not only that, there was no medical defense back then. So my company's name is Berkeley Patients Group. So Jim McClellan, who unfortunately passed away due to AIDS, thought so deeply on the subject that they realized that having the word patients in the name, that would be heard every time in court when it was read out, and that hopefully, due to jury nullification, the jury would hear that these were patients. And so that's the forethought that went into it back in the day. It was all about medical defense, going to jail and fighting it out through the jail systems, and fighting out through the courts outright. So that's where we expected to go, and we never expected to now be turning 25 next month. A little history lesson for you all.
I grew up in Southern California.
Dude,
so
94.
benefited from that. I was in high school during that time that you're talking about, and then started growing a couple of years later down there under the Prop 215, and honestly, I was going to a couple dispensaries and just I started growing because I wanted to make better flour. You know, not necessarily to make money or get into the industry or anything like that. I just wanted, wanted to see it start to finish, make sure it was a clean product and there was nothing. You know, I knew the whole process, and then having a green thumb from watering plants as a kid, I was like, this is fun. I love this, and hobby became full time, man, and just moved up to the mountains in a cabin and did it pretty much full time, supplying dispensaries, just solo growing it for for a while. In that market in the good days, I think, of the California market before it got flooded. But it's interesting to see a revival of kind of the craft artisan level, and definitely I think solventless and hash is bringing that back, kind of a more craft approach. So
Do you
I hope
remember,
so.
Marcus? Do you remember, Marcus,
Yeah.
when we first
I
back
don't
in
know.
what 2017 had on rosin with they were first pressing rosin, or was it 2015 we did that in Barcelona?
2015. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
so
It was literally
almost
like the
9
month.
years ago from just a little creation that was done on Hash Church. Now it's international market rosin. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
in
Oh no,
2017,
it's
got the first licensed rosin lab and hash lab in Nevada. That was a nice
yeah,
one.
that was the year we went rec.
Recently, you're right
2017
when we went rec,
recreational.
and it was overpriced flower rosin, and we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to take you back to 94 again, that was the year we got hemp growing in Canada. That was the first hemp field in Canada, and that was Joe Strobel and Jeff Kime in Ontario who got that hemp field. We got ours the next year in 95. But yeah, well, you were doing that work, Etienne. That's what we were doing in Manitoba, just figuring out how to get hemp growing legally in our province so that we could grow like an experimental field. And I'll tell you, man, it was a pretty big surprise. Wagwan, Alex.
What's up,
Speaking of,
Rasta?
there's somebody who used to sling weed below us in the Cannabis Action Network. What's up, motherfucker?
Hey, brother. Oh, shit. Yeah, well, 95, 94, that's when it was all going down, huh? Fucking Haight Ashbury, Etienne. This motherfucker was, I mean, I was like off the boat from Minnesota, this upper middle class kid. And next thing you know, I'm like sleeping on a couch at the Cannabis Action Network. Etienne just gets out of the service, and that dude is like regimented like a motherfucker. And he's like knocking on my door, waking me up. He's like, come on, let's go. Let's go. And it was a totally new world for me, man. And there I was. And then we had a spot on Telegraph and Haight Ashbury, actually.
Yeah. We actually had one of 6 permits to set up anywhere in the city of San Francisco. So we would set up at Haight and Ashbury because all the fucking stoners were coming through, right, Dr. Scaldo?
It was crazy times, man.
Much
That
love
was
to you,
great.
Alex. I know it's been many years, my friend.
You too, brother. You too, man. I've been working hard out here in Europe, bro. Trying to fucking make shit happen. Redemption
Dude, you're
song,
doing things
Rasta.
good, man. You're doing good things good, man. I enjoy the event. I can't even imagine how insane it's going to be in Germany this year with that announcement last year right before the show.
Man, we've been pushing it for a long time, and I mean, even I'm surprised that Germany legalized like they did. The medical stuff doesn't surprise me so much, but well, it actually does because they just took cannabis off the narcotics list in Germany. So it can't be understated what a huge thing that is to just take the wind out of Babylon's sail, you know? And so they just didn't. They already had a pretty robust medical system. And then they're just like, you know what? We're going to take cannabis off the narcotics list, and we're going to let everybody grow in their house, and we're going to let everybody have 25 grams, and we're going to, and then we're going to do these social clubs, right? So that was the most surprising thing is the cultivation associations or the social clubs. That was like the kind of the, you know, Germans, they always want, you know, Ordnung,
The
And
Germans just had to find out how to grow with discipline, and then it was widely accepted by all Germans.
I
well, there
figured the
was
Germans would have mastered hydroponics due to perfection. You know what I'm saying? Just to their analness of every single point through the system to make sure it is perfect.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I was so surprised when they did. And they did master. In the '90s, Europe just started growing skunk. Europe just had so much shitty hash, and still to this day, if you give someone hash or offer them like good hash or some chronic, they're always going to pick the flower. Or 90% they'll still pick the flower because generationally they're just traumatized for the years of like hard rock hard Moroccan hash, for example. Not like
The
the
whole
King
time,
Hassan.
though,
Ooh.
Germany
business.
was allowing industrial hemp.
Well, didn't hemp flax Dronkers didn't he grows a lot of hemp there as
Yeah,
far as
but
I
I'm talking
know.
about in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, I didn't. Well, that was well, Dronkers was growing in the '90s there. I remember he came up with this invention for this combine that would specially harvest it. Like in the
We brought one of those over to Canada to our hemp field, and we had a big event in our hemp field, and we used that fucking thing, this crazy Dutch harvester thing that we've literally brought over from Holland. And I'll never forget, it was these two big spinning things in the front that cut the field down. And we basically had a pageant in the field with investors and people, the little cutting of the line, like it was all cheesed out. And when he hit hit the field, because we also brought the guy who built the thing and who operated it. When he started driving over the 5 acres that he, basically harvested right in front of us, the pollen, I had never seen pollen that thick in my life. And I remember thinking like, ooh, like people that can't breathe are going to be fucked. This is like serious amounts of pollen, man. And what people were tripping about, a lot of people were like in this cloud of pollen and they were like, this isn't even upsetting my allergies. And I was just kind of like, fucking hemp, eh? Even the pollen is good.
Well,
I
I once snorted a line of keef, and I'll totally tell everyone not to
Jesus.
fucking do that because I don't know. I was in my
Oof.
I was like 19 probably, and I was like,
That must have been
remember
horrible.
we had the shaker that Mila made, and,
Yeah.
we were in the mid.
Yeah.
Remember?
That little gray thing, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it was a gray. It was basically a little gray cup with a sieve screen with a screw top on both ends, and we would use that, right?
Exactly, and the red receptacle in the bottom that would come off, plastic that would come off and on. And so we were getting all this brownberry in the Midwest, and so we take our Pretendica, our kind of, and we would shake the hell out of it, and to get a better product in the Midwest, and it was life saving. But yeah, one, I don't know, fateless day in fucking the summer, me and my boy snorted a line of, we're just like, you know what, bro? Let's fucking snort a line of keef. And you'll sneeze, okay? That's all I say.
Dude, that's like infection center. Anyone that's ever gotten resin in their eye and knows what that feels like would want to avoid putting it in your nose at all costs. Oh my God, dude.
It was so Philistine. My
Well,
goodness
I'm
gracious.
surprised you weren't sticking it up your butt. I mean,
Well,
that makes more
That
sense.
was a different
Well, that's what-
generation.
That's what El Soli did. Remember?
Yeah,
Well,
I know well.
that's what we do now with the Rick Simpson oil and the coconut, right? So that shit's
You
real.
you put the lime in the coconut?
Oh,
fuck.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I have a few things to say.
Your
go ahead.
Pretendica and kind of. I like
Kind
those
of.
terms, dude.
The kind of.
It's like an honest. Yeah, we got the kind of.
But we also
Yeah.
saw with Germany coming online, we saw the Philippines coming online medically, and we saw also the Czech Republic this week is also looking at coming online. So what started, I knew that once Germany went, the rest of the EU is going to follow. I mean, it was surprising that it was Switzerland that really did it first and going through their series of trials, because I think that became Alex, quote me if I'm wrong here, but I think they're watching Switzerland go through those series of trials and successes emboldened the Germans to go there to now follow those series of trials to arrive, which I think Switzerland's in its 10th trial and they're having over-the-counter sales. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think
they for sure.
Luxembourg has gotten quite liberal also.
Yes, cannabis is very much tolerated in Luxembourg and places like Malta. However, the market is not really there. But with regards to what Etienne just said, the Germans definitely looked at the Swiss pilot projects, and that's how they basically took that model for their what they call Pillar 2, which is not yet implemented or just starting to become implemented. So basically, Germany did 5 things when they changed the law. They decriminalized, so that's 3 plants, 25 or 50 grams in the house, 25 at home. They did the social clubs, the cultivation societies. They legalized seeds and clones commercially, actually, so you can get them at like a Fred Meyer, for example, or the German equivalent. They took cannabis off the narcotics list. They stopped the tender also, so now anybody can be a domestic producer, anyone with that adheres to the rules and regulations and the stipulations, but there's no bid, there's no tender anymore. And then the 5th major thing they did was the pilot projects, Pillar 2, and they took from the Swiss. I'm of the ilk that the pilot projects are interesting because basically the EU will not allow, the EU and the UN both will not allow full adult use license regulation. And it's really the EU because the UN, they can't do punitive measures, but the EU actually can do basically sue countries if they go against their edicts and dictates. So now what Germany did is they did a complete end around, made de facto legalization through medical, I could argue, especially now that it came off the narcotics list, something that could be likened to when we had de facto legalization on the West Coast. And then there's the pilot projects, which are what everyone knows to be the precursors to eventual legalization. So the pilot projects are going to do what they do, but that's basically, you can do anything in the EU if it's under medical or research auspices, and Germany did everything.
Dude, every single grow tent in Germany sold out in 3 days when they made that announcement. My buddy owns a huge distribution network in Germany. He said he was getting over 1,000 calls a day. He said literally it shut the entire country down. Everyone that was doing business there, like, ground to a halt because they couldn't, no one was prepared for the calls and the business.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because in the EU, a decade ago, I could legally send seeds to the UK. I could legally send them to Spain. I could legally send them to Austria. But Germany, they had a weird law for cannabis seeds where if they were really cheap and for hemp, legal. If they were expensive per seed, they were illegal.
Say that again. If they were, what was the 2 distinctions?
So if the seeds were cheap, like $100 uh, for 20 kilos or something, they were legal. But if they were expensive, like $5 or $10 a seed, they were illegal in Germany for years.
Interesting. Well, they're not now, and there's one other thing that happened, or they're not illegal now, and so one other thing happened also, was about to happen. So the irony of this whole thing is, and where Switzerland really pioneered, obviously, was the CBD thing, because they allowed 1% when everyone else was allowing 0.02 or 0.3. So and the irony is that as Germany became the biggest market in Europe under medical, since basically 2017 that started to happen, they CBD was, they were cracking down on CBD, where in other European countries you could get it at the gas station, the flowers, you get it everywhere. It's pretty much ubiquitous in Europe, CBD flower. But in Germany, you could still find it, but it was like, man, it was precarious. And so as of basically January 1st, Germany's going to do something that is what they would call delete the intoxication clause. And basically that means, for all effective purposes, that now CBD will be legal in Germany. Now I say that not novel foods, but that's still a thing, and that you need to, you can't have gummy CBDs yet, but you can sell the flower now in Germany as of January 1st, likely. So everything is flipping. And I gotta say, well, we just had our conference in Slovenia, where I live, a couple of weeks ago, and I've been doing some sick, crazy work down here. And we are about to introduce legislation in a few weeks that will, that's very much like Germany's legislation. I figured the most important things were taking it off the narcotics list and decriminalizing it, and having everybody able to grow a certain amount of plants and then have a certain amount of possession on them. And we're also going to be rewriting the criminal codes. I mean, actually, what I'm telling you now, like, this could be, nobody even knows this shit, actually. And we'll be rewriting the criminal codes. And hopefully we won't have to compromise and make it even more. The compromise we'll have to make is it might be even more a penalty if you sell to a youth, which I'm not for, but it's the one compromise that we'll likely have to make every other criminal penalty towards cannabis be at least halved. So
we got to dial back on selling to the youths. Then is that what you're saying? We got to dial back on selling to the youths.
I guess that. I mean, I know if I was 16, I'd be really bummed out. I mean, Minnesota, I'd be the damn, you know.
And
but it doesn't matter
if you buy it.
It doesn't matter because you can get it as a kid easier than you can get alcohol, which is regulated, right? So that's.
And what if you buy it from a youth? You get in more trouble?
No, in fact, Germany or Europe in general is very interesting in terms of their alcohol laws. They don't have a minor in possession law. They don't have they only put the onus on the adult that would sell it to them. So if you're drunk as a youth, it's not a crime. If you get caught with alcohol, in most countries, it's not a crime.
But in the Netherlands, you can't buy it till you're 18. Used to be 16.
No, I know, but if you procure it surreptitious, or in through whatever means, then there's no criminality towards the youth using alcohol. There's only the criminality towards where they might have they might have gotten it from, or how they procured it, which is very interesting. And so I can only assume the same thing would be the case for cannabis, which. Well, let me think about that. That's very interesting. Now you got me thinking. But it's a very interesting for alcohol. So why wouldn't that be the same case for cannabis? So that's a good argument.
I'll have to see the direction that it goes, man. Are you where are you at right now?
I'm in Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Okay.
And everybody's welcome to come visit INI, man. It truly is the one of the gems of the universe here in Slovenia.
Tell us a few things about it. You've told me before where you like nailed all these different, like it's got this, it's got this, it's got this. Like, is that the sort of spot you're at?
Yeah, man, dude, I live in paradise, basically. Slovenia and the Croatian coast, they're amazing. Slovenia is the size of New Jersey. It's 70% forested. It's got 5 or 6 major different regions. There's only 3 countries with the Alps, Alps and the Mediterranean. That's France, Italy, and Slovenia. And so I live 45 minutes from the coast, and I live 20 minutes from the Alps. And so it's a funny little. So I just drove to. My wife and daughter, they wanted some Italian food yesterday. So we drove to Italy, and we had Italian food in Italy. And it took about an hour and 15 minutes to get to Udine, Italy, and have some food. So it's a crazy place. It's super clean. It's super safe. It's one of the safest countries in the world. It's like living in fucking Singapore or some shit. And my daughter can go into the town at night by herself. She's 13, and there's really not a care in the world. It's still kind of old world safe. And the food quality is insane. It's an English speaking country. Everyone speaks perfect English, probably better than the average American. And I'm not just being hyperbolic. And, you know, and it's skiing, snow rafting. I mean, basically it's like a national park. A whole country is a national park, and everyone's having one big fucking party in here. And what is interesting is that Slovenia, it's part of the Balkans and the ex-Yugoslavia, but it's also very Germanic, part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire also. So it's kind of part Balkan and part Germanic, if you will. So it's like living in a Northern European country, but the people have more soul, to just keep it real.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely got to get out there and check it out.
It's retarded, man. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Was it Slovenian anarchist who started the First World War?
Well, I don't know if it's a Slovenian anarchist. That's probably I'm sure that could be the case. Of course, that was what in Sarajevo when we all are taught with the Archduke Ferdinand thing. So that's about all I'm not
talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was in Sarajevo, so that was in Yugoslavia. But I didn't know if it was a Slovenian national or not. Or actually, there was no Slovenian national at that point.
I think you're right, Sam. I haven't looked it up directly, but I remember seeing the pistol the other day.
I'm just thinking from memory because I'm sort of like a international history buff, and I think I'm correct, but I'm not sure.
Well, Lord knows it's an interesting place in the world, and it's got a lot of flavor over here. And I'm just lucky to live here, learn the language, and be part of their culture, and they accept me as one of their own. So I'm just I'm total expatriate, I guess, at this point, and I'm cool with that. But y'all need to come over and visit. Yeah, you need to come over and visit because it really is stupid. It's there's nothing like it in the world. It's just there's a calm and a peace about this country that I've lived in a lot of places. And I mean, just when I crossed the border yesterday in Italy, fucking cops everywhere and shit. I'm just like, God damn. And it's like you just feel every
taking life serious, eh?
So what's that?
Those cops, they're taking life serious.
Well, and in Slovenia, you just don't feel that it's a police state. You don't feel this heavy police presence. There's a few controls every now and then after a basketball game, so it ain't perfect. But compared to any place I've ever lived, the police are extremely mellow. They're just not all up in your business. And you know, it's cool because there's no crime here, right? So you know, a lot of times in a situation like that, you have, and I'm sure I know in some small Slovenian towns, they'll crack heads over stupid shit because there's nothing else to crack heads over. But in general, that phenomenon is not too prevalent. Where in America, it's like, oh man, you know, we've got this nice community, so you're busting me for jaywalking or smoking a joint or whatever little menial crime that would or action that would be. So yeah, Slovenia is not a police state, and I'm just here to fight. And kind of, I feel like I fell back. You know, I came to this small little bastion to fight really hard to create a public policy that was possible. Because you know, if I want to talk to the prime minister, you know, it's possible, right? So up to that high. So it's like there's a lot of accessibility here in Slovenia because it's so small, and because it's an EU country. Then whatever one might do here is then precedent, so to speak, to the entire EU.
What is the population of Slovenia?
It's 2 million.
Man, it's not too high at all. What you know, we were talking. Etienne was asking Sam, or Sam asked Etienne who the most famous politician he had interviewed or met up with, and you always have like pretty heavy people at these events. Like, what's been your strategy for getting in touch with these people?
Man, you know, it's changed over the years. It's funny, but you know, money talks and bullshit walks for one. But when it comes to politicians, I've never paid a politician, but we did do fundraisers for politicians, right? So you know, that's how I would get. Actually, that's how I would get politicians. Is you just say you're gonna have a fundraiser for them, And come around 2014, 2015, that's when the cannabis constituency started to really come alive, and politicians were like, yeah, I'm down with going to this cannabis event and rallying money and donations and constituents. And so we did I think I'm one of the only persons to do a bipartisan fundraiser at the same time in the Jerry Garcia suite at the Grand Hyatt or Hyatt Reed, on Embarcadero there, Etienne down there, the Grand Hyatt, I think it is. And in the Jerry Garcia suite, we did it with Dana Rohrabacher and Blumenauer from Portland. And Blumenauer was a Democrat, Rohrabacher was a Republican, a libertarian Republican. But yeah, and then Joe Garofoli wrote a big story about it in the Chronicle. And I didn't even raise them that much money. In fact, I was kind of like, it was just a pittance, but they were really cool, and they didn't break my balls that I just didn't raise them, but like a few grand each or some shit like that. Shit, we raised Gavin Newsom, which I fucking regret now, actually. Like $45,000. So we raised his Ross almost 50 G's back in when he was lieutenant governor, just before he became governor. And that was, yeah. So I actually am not so down with the politicians anymore because, one that I kind of liked that spoke at a couple of our events was Tulsi Gabbard. But still, even, it's just like, it's a fucking rough game. And, now I just like getting famous people. We were at the Damian Marley party we had on the beach in Barcelona. So that was probably
That was nuts.
That was probably one of the big. We did KRS-One in Berlin. I mean, we've done a lot of stupid
Dude,
shit.
listen, puffin dabs at the Adelon Hotel, looking at the Brandenburg right there. Like that one was a weird one. That one was.
Oh. Man, they give me so much shit. They're like, "Now, Alex, please, no smoking on the terrace this time." And I'd be like, "Oh, no problem, no problem." But they really know that we're gonna for sure smoke on the terrace, and they're like, because all the employees love us and shit, and the manager's just like, "Now, Alex, no smoking on the terrace." I'm like, "Oh, no problem, I got you."
Just has
and of
to
course,
say it. You just
we
have
blow
to say it.
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
this is the Adelon Hotel, dude. This is the hotel that Michael Jackson shook the baby over the.
Oh shit, that was that hotel, bro. I didn't know that.
That was that's the Adelon Hotel, dude. It has a crazy history, bro. Like Nazis stole it from the Jewish family that owned it, and they had it for years, and it ended up getting. Yeah. It's an interesting history to read, and you can definitely feel it walking in the. Like holy shit, that was like Nazi headquarters for some serious years.
Yeah, so Alex, that's why I agree with you. That's why I work now. We haven't seen or talked in years. I work at the UN now. I'm working on changing international law at the UN level by 2030, because we got the most cannabis removed from the most dangerous drugs category in 2020. The people who mentor me did, Michael Krawitz.
Oh wow.
And
oh wow.
So we're on point. Yeah, I'm in Vienna every year for the C&D. So if you happen to be in Austria during they haven't announced the time yet in March, but my wife and I travel yearly to lobby with the other NGOs for access to cannabis and do side events at the UN to counter Kevin Sabet and his lies and bullshittery.
Fucking Sabet, dude. Homeboy's up in Europe. I saw him all I saw him all over the place when Germany was.
He's aligned with Jazz Pharmaceuticals now, so he's there. God. He's going out there and attacking alcohol and cigarettes, not talking about pharmaceuticals, because he's now in their pocket. So he did a side event with them at the UN. That's how I know.
Yeah, he's a feckless buffoon of the highest order. And I'm actually going to Cultiva Vienna in this week, the next week. And so when you're in Vienna, I'm only 4 hours away from Vienna, and then also, yep, you just come right down to Paradise, bro. It's insane. Vienna South and shit, little baby Vienna, and fucking and I'm also doing I just confirmed an event in Brussels for May 15th, which will be a policy event, Etienne. And so I would love to talk to you about that. It's a small event, just like going to be like 120 people max, but it's going to be lobbying basically a lobby event for the EU. And if we could incorporate UN shit into that too, obviously that'd be double the pleasure and double the fun. And then on the 14th of May, we actually have we're doing a VIP reception at the Slovenian embassy in Brussels.
Well, I am a diplomat with the Cannabis Embassy because we're actually working on becoming a sui generis country, which is the same as Malta, which is a country without borders. And I would actually have the diplomatic immunity to go along with that. So I'm working at that level now.
That's fucking tight, bro. Oh my God.
Everyone needs a dip. You got to have a dip, man. Hey, coming back from Nepal?
Everybody, you got to work on your diplomatic, situation. It's so key, in the international world. You know what I'm saying? It's just important.
Oh my
But
God.
I used to get it
I'm
in
happy
Jamaica.
to discuss more offline. Happily, it's good
Cool.
to hear and see everything you're doing.
Yeah, you too, brother. You too, for real, man.
Yeah, you guys are both
That's
on
awesome.
the email, so you got. I did send you the email, right, Alex? Because
Yeah, we just haven't been
connect you to
in
Etienne.
contact for many years. Yeah, just each person doing their own thing and whatever. But no, man, when I say Etienne taught me everything I knew about it, I mean he and Debbie, right? Because Debbie was running everything, and then but in terms of like on the ground, get busy. Although I gotta say, Debbie was not fucking scared of picking up a bunch of shit, throwing it into a car, setting it up. I mean, she worked so hard. I mean, she let this gal led us boys by example. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
She was one.
Yeah.
She's one tough cookie. And
But yeah, I was the sergeant running her orders. So yeah, I mean, but Alex,
exactly.
You're one of the few that would actually run with the big dogs. There was a lot. You watched how many people say, "Oh, I can get off this porch and run with them," and never even show up. But you were consistently, as we say, how we judge people is who's standing at the van at the end of the thing, loading the van. That was the true test of who was the dedicated versus who was there to party. You know what I'm saying? Who was there to do the work? And, I got to give you credit. You and Jeff Jones and others really took your dog legs and ran the fuck off with them. So congrats and respect.
Thanks. Well, it all started right there, and it was magical fucking times. And yeah, I hated that shit. I fucking hate it, except I was so happy to be there and being part of something and growing and building. But oh my God, I mean, I'm a
He was a late sleeper, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know. Alex usually partied late and didn't want to have to get up. And, we had to be on the avenue standing tall at 10 a.m.,
right.
with our hemp books and our grow books and everything else to talk to people.
Donation bucket.
Donations of any kind. Yeah. And so this is how the movement started. It was all grassroots, going out, doing it, putting in. I mean, it was all volunteer, folks. We did not get paid. We got room and board and food. People don't realize that as well, Alex, is that we had to hustle and do all our shit for anything that we wanted, like clothes.
It was raga. It was so raga.
Well, that's why you flipped weed, right? You were able to, do the things you needed to do.
I did a little bit, but I was just the shittiest weed dealer. The only time I was ever a good weed dealer was when I was in Minnesota when I was 19. And then I came over and I remember to Cali, and I just remember people saying, "Hey man, there's no money in kind bud," because it was like $1,200 a cuper already, right? And back then it was so fucking expensive. And if you think about like inflation adjusted, how much $1,200 a cuper would be now, that's like 800 is 1,000 an Oscar or some shit, man. God damn. I was just, it was debilitating, actually. Yeah, it was so debilitating, man. And yeah, so how did I even fucking make? I don't know. I was just so raga. I just begged my parents to send me another $500 every month or some shit. And they're just like thinking I'm just, what the fuck, That's when I started producing the hip hop shows, just to make a little fucking money. And I made a little money doing that, but not much.
There ain't no money in music promotion.
No, I made like $1,500 once on a show, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I lost 3,000 on the next one and shit.
That sounds about right. Yeah, while you guys were paying $4,800 for a pound, we were buying it for like 2,000 Canadian a pound. It was like,
Yeah, but it was that shitty Beasters.
no,
You were
this was
smoking.
before the Beasters.
Oh yeah?
A lot oh yeah, well, Beasters had a unique way of being created. You know, there was some groups that were given cuts that grew, you know, great weed for a short period of time, and then they just were like, oh, we don't have to dry this, we don't have to wait till they just started cutting all these different corners. But before that, the Beasters, it was fine weed. But what people were doing, and these were the American buyers, because the Canadians couldn't get away with it, they would tumble it. You know, they would buy like 500 pounds and then just tumble it real quick and just grab like 10 pounds or 10 kgs of
Totally. And
sift.
we
And
get
it
that
was,
shit and it would just be like dry.
dude, it would be tumbled
Oh no,
out
it'd be
weed.
wet. It'd still be wet. What are you talking about? It would be in that seal, those whole
Oh yeah, I mean,
seal logs. Remember?
it'd be wet, but I guess it would have that dusty, like tiny particle dust is what I remember. Like not
Yeah, because they
fucking
sifted
trichomes.
it. Because they sifted it. So
That
they're
makes
moving
sense.
it all around, and now the bud itself is kind of like coated in like sift remnants. It was a bummer
Oh
to
my
say the
God.
least. I was
But
always
you
like,
used to
dude,
have
you can
super
come here.
con like Humboldt style weed up in there. You could get
Great.
that
Yeah,
quality.
there was some beautiful, beautiful quality flower that you could get for sure. But only the people who were willing to pay for it got it. And they also had different supply chains that protected it throughout the entire supply chain so that it didn't get destroyed.
I mean, California, the Prop 215 days, you could home grow it, walk it into a dispensary, just, you know, cold call them the same day, walk in, hey, is anybody there? You know, and they'd have a buyer there, check it out, and then serve it deli style to the customers. But it was good, you know, it was
Yeah.
I think it was one of the best markets at the time.
For
And
sure.
we taught that. We actually I'd actually taught acquisitions at Oaksterdam University. I taught people how to take your weed, how to package it correctly, go out to your car, make sure your turn signals work, make sure your lights were on, you know, all things so that you didn't get pulled over when you come to see us, because we would have people just like grab, you know, kilos out of their trunk and walking in and dropping them. Like, sir, you dropped your kilo. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Fuck. Dude, at least in Switzerland, they had, you know, the smarts to be like, no, you got to put that shit in a pillowcase, bro. Then you can just bring like 5 pillowcases into the store, and then they buy it, you know, take out the staples from the sealed, and then they're like breaking it up into eighths and quarters in these little aromatherapy pouches. That's what they were legally selling weed for in Switzerland. And I remember my one buddy had a store. He was like, yes, I'm very strict with the customers. I tell them, whatever you do, do not rip this open and roll the cannabis into joints and smoke them. Don't do that. I was like, okay, dude. I think everyone's doing it. Basel, this little town in Switzerland. Remember how many kids there were coming from France and Germany to buy weed? There was over 200 fucking Basel. Yeah, there was over 200 shops there, man.
It was bananas.
That's like 2001.
So what's the quality of what you see there in your local, Alex? I mean, do you see hash? Do you see flower? All the above?
Yeah, good question. Good question. So basically in Europe now, these cats, if you know the right cats, you know, it's you could smoke real tough. I think the best weed overall in Europe is actually this is just my experience, but the coffee shops, the coffee shops in Barcelona it's really strong weed, man. And I'm really impressed by it. Whereas in Amsterdam, I was never impressed like I was in Spain. Locally here, you know, it's like you get a lot of the home there is a lot of like homegrown, right? In the classic sense, right? Of it's like how we used to look at homegrown, right? But then they got some nerd scientific shit happening here also, and they have super quality stuff. So I actually like to get my I like to take that homegrown, that sun-grown outdoor, actually, right? And then water isolate it. So I get sun-grown weed from kind of like we were doing with the shaker fucking 35 years ago in Minneapolis, Midwest or whatever, basically, right? But I'm doing that now, so I'm taking that shit that I'm isolating it up, and then I prefer that. And of course, I love really good Moroccan. And in America, you fucking can't get it, or in the East Coast, maybe you could a little bit back in the day, but it's so weird how you can't get any Moroccan hash in Cali, and it's just odd. You probably get it more in Canada, Marcus, I reckon, than fucking.
We see Afghani, we see Lebanese. You don't see Moroccan as often for
That's
whatever
wild
reason.
because but we really don't see it in California. Just like you don't see any fucking pure sativas. Remember the Katsu coffee shop in Amsterdam
Oh
when you
yeah,
walk in?
Oh,
yeah.
still go
Course.
there. That's the only
Yeah.
spot. Rob Clark tells me it's the still spot he only goes to because that's where you can only get those extended,
You still have the
flower and
haze.
hazes, those
Yeah.
narrow leaf varietals.
Exactly. It's the only fucking place. Like you cannot get haze, and so you can't get. I find it funny in America. We have all this choice in the West Coast, and you get, you walk into a dispensary, it's like but you can't get Moroccan hash. You can't get any exotic hash at all, really, from around the world, which is understandably so because of the market. But the haze thing, is even more of a quagmire. Like why? Nobody can, like, why isn't anybody growing the super silver, the Neville's, or the whatever? I mean, I know it takes a little longer, but you would think there'd be a niche there.
Super
slightly
silver was a big popular on the
awesome.
West. Super awesome. Yeah. And then when I was in Barcelona years ago, and I don't even speak any Spanish, I had some bomb hash within about 3 hours of landing.
Yeah, Barcelona's not a problem nowadays to get good stash. I remember the year it happened, where because we'd been going since 2004, and it was Soma and myself, and we'd always meet up there and have a session. And I think it was like around 2013 or 2014 that we were both in agreement that we didn't need to bring resin there anymore, that we actually could get something equally or at least as good, but maybe better than what we even currently had. And that was from 2004. 2004, let me tell you, whatever you are smoking in Barcelona, you best have brought it.
Well, it was 2000. Yeah, it was 2000. It was good though. It was good hash, but I got
Well, you
but
could
I'm
always
talking
get
about
good
great
hash.
I think I got lucky.
Yeah, you could always get good Moroccan, but even the highest, the best Moroccan is only going to be probably fucking 15% back in the day, right?
Exactly.
So you're not going to get no like rosin or
Someone and I were
isolated.
talking about full melt. We were talking about melt, like hash that melts into a liquid, sun grown, 6-star.
Yeah.
Don't need to bring it. So my work will be done when the whole world is like that. When the whole world just has access to and in particular, like flavor profiles that aren't, the dominant prohibition based flavor profiles that were based on time and, quickness. It's like, oh, we can't grow that. It's 23 weeks long. Let's just grow this one. It's 7.5 weeks long. It'd be nice to see. I'd love to be able to go the same way you buy nuts at the co-op store and just scoop big scoops of full melt dry sift haze cultivars. I'm utopian.
Well,
One day.
I think in the future we should have Christmas tree style farms. I mean, where a guy drives in with a pickup truck and picks 5 or 10 plants, cuts them down, and takes them away.
I still want. I want a hash advent calendar with a different hash for every day going up to Christmas, and then another for the 12 days after. Because you got to get in the spirit of things, right? I'm an atheist, but I'm down for any religious celebration.
I'm an atheist, but I believe in Santa Claus.
I like the idea.
I sat on his lap. I haven't sat on Jesus's lap.
Of a farm share, going to the farm and picking out, like you said, picking out the Christmas tree, but picking out the stuff and then saying, "Hey, I want my hash made from these plants after I smell it."
So Switzerland had that as well in 2001. All the U-picks where you could just stop and throw
Yeah.
some francs in a little mailbox and then pick some of those flowers or whatever it was there. They planted big cannabis plants there too. So you could just like put in 5 francs and take a plant home. But I like the idea, Sam. I think it's one I can get behind. That is for sure.
I remember that in Switzerland actually. A dude named Armand at like Cannabis land or some shit. It's so long ago I can only remember. You could go to his place and like fucking cut a tree and just take it back. Cool for him. He don't have to
Yeah,
trim
dude.
it. And
Hey, actually, in upstate New York, a veteran friend of mine, I think her and her wife run a place called Ananda Farms, Ananda Farms, where I mean it's CBD plants, but they allow you, you pay a flat fee and you can go pick any tree in the farm and go hack it down and take it away and produce it
that
however you
is
want.
such a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, look who's here. Yes.
Is that the cannabis historian?
I thought it was.
Sorry, I kind of spaced out. I was supposed to come on today and forgot about it. Took a nap.
Well, I'm glad you're fucking here. Chris Bennett in the house, dude. Fuck, it's been too long, man. Look at you. You're on the east side of things now, living life and surfing and fucking just off. That's crazy that you're not on the West Coast anymore, man. You were here for a long time.
Yeah, my whole life, 60 years. So
Holy shit. Well, how are things out there?
I thought it was Soma for a second.
Soma was on a couple of weeks ago. He thought you were Soma for a second. Alex from ICBC conference there.
Quick second.
It's the hair.
I don't get my glasses on, so from afar it was definitely Soma-esque.
Yeah, he came in with his snake the other day. He was sitting there. He was like, my snake loves Hash Church. It hasn't moved in half an hour. And I had noticed that his snake wasn't moving at all. And he was like, I've had this snake 20 years, 22 years, however long it's been. And yeah, it wasn't moving. So he was here for the visit. How are things going over there, Chris?
I dig it here in Nova Scotia. It's like small town living. You don't see street people and drug addicts and stuff. And I'm stoked to be surfing again. Before I was like a cannabis activist in the 80s and 90s, I was living out on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and surfing was my mainstay. And I didn't think I'd ever get back into it again. It was so old, but yeah, no, I'm totally stoked to be here catching waves, and got some old stoner friends here that surf and hang out and stuff. So it's been good. And I wrote a book since I was here as well, Cannabis, the Lost Sacrament of the Ancient World. So yeah, it's been good, man.
Fucking A, dude. Well, I love hearing that, man. I definitely, when I first met you, which was probably in the 90s, you were definitely a surfer. I think you lived on a boat at the time, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's funny, that boat was actually from here, about 30 miles from where I live, Shag Harbor, where they had the big UFO incident. And it was a lobster boat, got brought out to the West Coast and became a troller for about 10 years. Then I got it when trolling went down, and I converted it to a liveaboard. And now I'm back where it was born.
Dude, that's so trippy, man. What the hell? That is fucking wild.
Yeah,
and the herbs are good over there. The culture's good in Nova Scotia. People are growing good herbs
there's
and
actually
making good
like
hash.
like the 80-year-old people across the street smoke grass and stuff. And I've met a couple of different buddies were Hash Church fans and had seen me on Hash Church. I saw you on Hash Church. So that's kind of cool.
That's wild.
Small town stoners that watch Hash Church and stuff. So that's kind of cool.
That's fucking awesome, dude. Very cool. Well, good to see you, man. Good to have you in the room. I'm just in Edmonton, of all places. I arrived here for the Grow Up conference that's happening, I guess, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm really just here to meet a couple of people. Actually, funny enough, yeah, just here to meet up with Canna and here to meet up with High Labs and a couple other groups that are doing different things in the cannabis industry here in Canada. And figured it's always a good time to hit people in a concentrated way when you can go to an event like this. Makes it easy.
have you seen my new book over there on the West Coast, or?
No, tell us about it.
Well, it's Cannabis, the Lost Sacrament. I'm actually go over a lot of ground I've covered earlier. In 2020, during the midst of COVID, they announced this archaeological discovery out of Israel and Tel Arad, Jerusalem. They found an 8th century BCE temple site that was a house of Yahweh. And there were 2 altars in this little tiny area, which was like a little hotbox room, and one altar, hashish, they say, cannabis resins, were burnt on. And this is 800 BCE, right? So probably the earliest evidence of actual, use of an extract of some kind. Either it wasn't raw flowers, it was either a resin product or hashish of some kind. And the other altar had frankincense. And so this interrelates with the research I'd done earlier regarding Sula Bennett's claims that the Hebrew terms kana and cannabis were cannabis, because this archaeological find fits perfectly with the different references that Sula Bennett referred to. So kind of interesting to see, had the theory for a long time, and then all of a sudden the archaeology comes up. Unfortunately, it's kind of been lost in the shuffle. It all happened in the midst of COVID and Trump tweeting madness daily. So it kind of didn't really get picked up on by the scholarly community, but it's still kind of out there and, making ground anyways.
Fucking crazy for sure. That's cool, man. I love that you're still doing that. I love listening to you talk about the history of cannabis, and you've done a good job all these years sort of keeping it together. And it is important that when I just look at, and you're kind of a big picture guy with the history thing, but even the small history of the last 40 or 50 years and the loss of cultivars and what an actual cultivar is, and not having the right, not everyone agreeing on terminology, and just it being kind of so loose that it's just nice to tighten it up and make it scholarly and be like, no, we're going to tighten this up and make it accurate. And if we're wrong, we'll acknowledge that we're wrong. And when we learn things, we'll change our perspective of what we're looking at. So, and that's so cool, dude, that the shit that you do could change any day or be completely enforced by something getting dug up from thousands of years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you got to be open to change. You know what I mean? It's definitely, I've been writing about this since the 90s. So definitely haven't held on to every idea I've ever had. Some stuff, you kind of have to let it go. It's just not really backed up. You know what I mean? And I really try to stick to, solid things like archaeological evidence or direct textual evidence, in Liber 420, I came across all these alchemical texts in Latin from the 16th, 17th century that had cannabis. Nobody had even ever translated any of this stuff, and it was stuff from well-known alchemists, So luckily, cannabis is the same in Latin and English, so it's easy to track down some of those references. Yeah, it's an amazing history, and it changes the way you look at the plant. I really think with cannabis, a large way that it affects you has to do with your intention and stuff behind its use. You sit down, you smoke a blunt, you sit down to play Xbox. You're not really having the same experience as a sadhu who's sitting at the edge of the Ganges River, partaking of a chilam to Shiva, and then performing his yogic asanas. You know what I mean? Even though it's the same substance, the actual effect is different, and this is purely related to intention, and I think that follows through in religious and magical use everywhere.
Well, how did you find your intention? I mean, I've known you a very long time, and I'm not really sure if I know your origin story. I mean, I can imagine you're probably involved in some mushrooms and smoking some weed.
I probably told you at some point, but I had this crazy religious experience around 1990, and it was kind of a series of events. I think the first of them was it happened out here on the East Coast, actually. Mount Cashel Orphanage got exposed by the Catholic-run orphanage got exposed for massive child molestations and cover-ups. And when that happened, I wanted to, it's like, what's up with this stuff? I wasn't really ever very religious. I thought, I'm going to read the Bible, see what this stuff's all about. And I kind of forgot about it. And at that time, I was a night watchman in a fish plant, surfing, growing weed. It was my kind of main thing. And one night I was at this fish plant, and just around that time too, I found out about hemp and all its industrial uses, and the big Clayoquot Sound controversy was going on about logging the Clayoquot Sound, and I found out about hemp for paper and stuff, so I started promoting hemp, and that kind of led to that. And then one night I was in this fish plant smoking weed, and about 4 a.m, and I was reading a newspaper, and it had a thing about Pat Robertson and Revelation 18 and the Gulf War in Iraq. And I started reading that, and I thought, I'm going to read the book of Revelation. And I read it, and I got to the end of the book of Revelation, and it says, on either side of the river of life stood the tree of life, bearing 12 manners of fruit, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And when I read that, I had this experience where like light just poured into me, I felt, and that was a reference to cannabis, and all its uses and stuff. And so I thought, well, if there was anything to that, then somebody somewhere will have written about it, And at first I was a little looser, like just going on belief and stuff like that. But thanks to critics and stuff, I started tightening my ship. It's like I listened to people who, challenge my ideas, and kind of just tried to make it a way of solid information. You know what I mean? Just getting tighter and tighter and more realistic as the decades went on.
Can you what's up, man? I'm Joshua. I love hearing about this stuff. I remember when you were on last time, I was sitting in chat just jumping up and down with enthusiasm. I have a background in Christianity myself, and went pretty deep and spiritual to the point where I just kind of had to put that aside a bit, you know what I mean? But anyways, I was curious to ask about the connection you were talking about, the last part of Revelation, the connection of the tree of life, and I'd love to hear you break that down.
Okay, well, like when I'm talking about Revelation, I want to be clear here. Revelation was written in the 1st century AD, clearly talking about Roman Empire and Roman emperors and all that type of stuff. And there's lots of academics and scholars who've written about this, and I totally agree. But at the same time, it's become something in the collective consciousness of humanity, this whole apocalyptic scenario, and it drives, like driving this election, with all the evangelical support for Trump, and people seeing him as on one side, seeing him as some sort of messianic figure, and on the other side, as some sort of antichrist figure by some people. So it still plays a huge role in our collective aspect, and so. I'm not saying that, that it's a prediction or anything like that. I think it's more like a projection that people just believing it so hard and wanting it to happen is kind of forcing the hand of reality. We could take a look at the formation of Israel. Israel would not have formed without huge support, because Israel plays a huge role in the book of Revelation. You know what I mean? It wasn't in existence, and it had to come back for the whole Revelation time clock to take place. So there's a huge aspect there. In regards to cannabis, I can't say that the author of Revelation thought what I thought, but cannabis does have an interesting connection with the tree of life and the whole Eden mythology. And this goes back to what I was saying about this 8th century BCE temple in Tel Arad, Jerusalem. They found 2 altars there. And it wasn't only they found an inscription that said the house of Yahweh, but they also found figurines that were dedicated to this goddess that was worshipped by the ancient Hebrews, Asherah. And Asherah, this is where a lot of the cannabis kind of use came in, is the mother goddess Asherah. And so they know that this site, and they know that Yahweh and Asherah were paired together, because they found all sorts of ancient inscriptions throughout the Levant that refer to Yahweh and his Asherah. So we know that they were combined as a cult at one time, and then this was later split off as the Hebrews moved into monotheism. That's a worship of one deity. Didn't start that way. It started polytheistically, like all the other religions of the Near East. And cannabis was kind of caught up in this suppression. One of the reasons why this temple site in Jerusalem was so well preserved is because, 2,800 years ago, somebody went in there in a day, knocked over the altars, buried them in sand, and put a floor right over them. So it totally preserved the stuff for future generations. And this is believed to have happened during the time of King Hezekiah, when they were going around and destroying all the evidence of Asherah worship, and his grandson Josiah, where they found a book in the temple Temple of Solomon that said all the other deities had to be gotten rid of, and we were only going to worship one God now at this time. And these references, like to Cannabis, are kind of tied up with this. In the first of these references in Exodus, God, who appears to Moses in flames of fire from within a burning bush, commands him to make holy anointing oil with about 8 pounds of cannabis mixed with myrrh and cinnamon. Probably everybody's already heard this one, right? And he puts it on his body, and he also puts it on the altar of incense, and then he speaks to the Lord over the pillar of smoke inside the altar, on the altar of incense inside the tent of the meeting. Tent of the meeting is the counterpart of this inner temple at Tel Arad, which was like about the size of a broom closet. So they would burn it in this like smoky area, fill up the whole place. And they'd ponder, what are we going to do? And then a voice would come back out of the smoke, or they imagine one did. And they, okay, this is what we're going to do. So this is like the scenario in Exodus, and it's very well loved, and celebrated. We see it also in the Song of Songs, and the Song of Songs is attributed to Solomon. And in the Bible, Solomon's condemned because he burns incense to the high places to the goddess. And this is again interwound with this goddess Asherah. And many scholars believe the Song of Songs is a sacred marriage song, or what they refer to as the Hieros Gamos, which means the sacred marriage. And it's got to do with the god and the goddess coming together and bringing fertility to the land, right? And then in Isaiah, God gets upset because he's like, you didn't bring any frankincense for me. You didn't bring any canna for me is the word that's used there. But you burdened me with your sins and iniquities, right? And so, God's upset. And these are the same plants that are mentioned too in Tel Arad, frankincense and cannabis, right? So it fits perfectly with that. In another scenario in Isaiah, we get an idea of how they all used it, because it says, then flew one of the seraphims unto me with a live coal, which he had taken with tongs off the altar, and he held it to my mouth. And lo, my iniquity was taken away and my sin purged. So that same incense that God was pissed off with because they were burning with his sins and iniquities and didn't bring any. When you use that, your sins and iniquities are lifted, right? And then in Jeremiah 6:20, Canna is condemned. Jeremiah says, God says through Jeremiah, what do I care from your canna from a distant land? Your frankincense does not please me. And these again are the exact same substances that are found at Tel Arad. And this is in the same time period that this temple in Jerusalem was canceled and buried under the ground, all fitting, kind of coinciding time-wise, right? And so and in Jeremiah 44, this is all when Jerusalem is destroyed by Babylon, Assyria, blah, blah, blah. And so in Jeremiah 44, Jeremiah blames the fall of Jerusalem on the people of Israel burning incense to the Queen of Heaven, which is Asherah, and again, kind of ties it all together. And this is where the cannabis kind of disappears from the whole Hebrew thing. And then we move from there into monotheism. The Torah, as we know, probably didn't even really get put down until about the 5th century BCE. So there's this whole polytheistic past, right? And one of the last things written in the Old Testament text is actually the Genesis story of Adam and Eve. And this is a reversal of the whole Eden mythology, of the actual mythology. One of the things that Hezekiah did when he was doing his reforms, it says he went into the temple of Yahweh, he removed all the symbols of Asherah, but he also took out the brazen serpent that the people had made because they were burning incense to it. And so we have the whole serpent in Eden mythology. Asherah is incorporated in Eve. There's a correlation between her Hebrew names and titles of Asherah. And the forbidden trees are, of course, the lost sacraments of the ancient world. But that's it's kind of a nutshell, kind of the Cliff Notes. But there's a lot of documentation for this. There's been a number of archaeological finds of cannabis, not only Tel Arad, but also in Bet Shemesh. In Israel, they found 4th century Common Era evidence of cannabis incense and topical preparations being used to aid childbirth. And they found evidence of the ritually made hemp cloth. And it said that the woman wove cloth for Asherah in the grounds of the temple. And they found evidence of ritual use of hemp for cloth making and stuff like that in the Levant as well. So there's a lot of it to do it, And if we wanted to think of Asherah in modern times, I would say that it kind of fits with the concept of Mother Earth. you know. And I really think there's a lot to be said about the divine feminine in cannabis. This is a plant that we breed specifically for its female qualities. And we can see what we know how bad the prohibition of cannabis has been on the world, the prohibition of hemp, and what it's done to the world. But when we take a look at what the prohibition of the divine feminine has done and how unbalanced it's created this planet that we're living on, literally Mother Earth, man, our mother, and it's causing all this war and destruction, this patriarchal, purely male way of thinking and belief. And cannabis is really a way of infusing that divine feminine. It's a return of the divine feminine in a lot of ways. And I think you see a lot of really powerful females like Selena there, who's with Mark, in the cannabis movement itself. You know what I mean? It's a real place that where women really are equal, or even more so in some cases. You know what I mean? It's a powerful thing.
So we don't know what type of genetics, but we know that it was used in most likely hand rubbed, probably, as we saw with temple balls.
They know it wasn't like raw flour. It was a resin product. So there's the authors of the paper, Cannabis and Frankincense, at the Judite Shrine in Tellurad. They say hashish specifically, but that's speculation on their part.
I mean, it wasn't just frankincense and hashish. I mean,
no, the frankincense was on one altar.
Right. And then hashish
was and the cannabis, yeah. And I should point out how this fits with Assyrian references. There's well accepted Assyrian references to cannabis under a very similar name, Cannabi. And they used it in a holy anointing oil to open one's ear to God. They burned it as an incense in the temple, and it was offered to Ishtar, who's the Assyrian counterpart of Asherah. So it's all interwound that way. But they did mix it with things. Myrrh was actually often mixed with cannabis in the ancient world, according to Assyrian texts, and the two were burnt together.
And you're forgetting about Buddha, who says that intentions are the chains that bind you to the wheel of life.
Yeah, well, good point.
You're born and reborn and born and reborn because you need to fulfill your intentions. It's kind of like desire.
Yeah, I could see that. Buddhism is kind of like interesting. I kind of, in my book on Soma, there's a lot of evidence that it was the rise of Buddhism that caused the suppression of the Soma cult, because the Soma was so wound up with ritual and stuff. It was just, you'd have to pay all this money every time you got a new cow or somebody got married or anything like that. You'd have to pay the priest, and they'd have to pay for the Soma ritual, pay for all these different rituals. And that ritualistic way of life was something that was kind of, in a lot of ways, at least according to texts that I've read, there's such a wide spectrum of Buddhism and Buddhist belief that, you can really go all over the place with it. Same with a lot of other religious stuff. That was when the beginning, this is when vegetarianism came into Hinduism. Vegetarianism wasn't part of the Vedic religion, which Hinduism grew out of. This is when the ban on alcohol kind of came into Hinduism. Vedic religion, alcohol was allowed and that type of thing. And this is also the time period where the identity of the ancient Soma was lost as well.
Selena has a question for you.
Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for your knowledge. I'm curious, can you talk to us a little bit more about what the actual ceremonies with Asherah looked like in those times?
Oh, man, I don't know. It's not like these things were written down. It's more like, we can identify our worship through inscriptions and images and inscriptions and that sort of thing, a definite, like, a lot of the pendants for her will have like a triangle, and there'll be the vaginal part at the bottom of the triangle, and often stuff's growing right out of that, talking about women's fertility and the correlation between that. People would go to her with their problems, and they would write that up and make a prayer, and try to have her intervention. She was particularly involved in childbirth. I think there's a mistake to think too with a lot of these ancient world goddesses that it's all completely lovey-dovey. Goddesses like Ishtar, they were also more like Kali, you know what I mean, in some respects, goddesses of love and war. But it definitely, like hierarchically in the community, it was like a different structure. It wasn't like necessarily totally male dominated. The cult of Asherah was hugely powerful, and the women that were behind that cult were hugely powerful in the kingdom, you know.
Thank you.
Chris.
What were some of the earliest growing agriculture? You know, talking about cannabis and agriculture. What were some of those?
Well, you know,
The
Carl
earliest
Sagan speculates that is humanity's first agricultural crop. And the term, you know, the root word for kana is Proto-Indo-European. So this is even before like the ancient Indo-European languages, which is the mother tongue of French, English, Sanskrit, all German, you know, all sorts of modern languages. Even before that mother tongue split off and became those languages, the term for cannabis was already known, Proto-Indo-Europeans, right? And archaeologically, you know, we can trace like hemp cloth back 10, 12,000 years in both Taiwan and in where, you know, Catalhayak in Turkey. So widely spread out 10,000 years ago, different cultures were already had established a growing of cannabis, right? So the cultivation is clearly, you know, going back right to the very beginnings of the agricultural thing. Now, Sagan, he speculated that it probably happened from ritual use. And he used the pygmies in Africa as an example of this. The pygmies were basically hunters or gatherers until they started growing cannabis, which they used for ritual purposes. They said God gave the pygmies cannabis so they'd be healthy and happy, you know, is their view. And they'd been growing it since the beginning of time and their mentality, but probably more like the Islamic period. It made it into that region in the Congo. But it's more like their concept of time, you know, and you know, agricultural time and the establishment of agricultural time has a huge amount to do with the concept of time. You know, it's probably no accident that that Father Time holds a scythe, which is the tool used for harvesting hemp. And you know, in regard to that concept, I think one of the first things that people notice when they first start using cannabis is a difference in time and how you experience time. You know, the jazz guys would talk about being able to slip in extra beats in the drums because of the time effect of cannabis, you know, and a minute can seem like an hour can seem like a minute. And that noticing that difference in time likely had a big effect in the conceivement of time itself, you know. But it goes right back. It's like, you know, so ancient that, you know, we don't even know where it started. You know what I mean? The Tibetan plateau or something is where the, you know, the biological origins. But as far as its use in agriculture, I think you'd be hard pressed to say China or the steppes or someplace like that, right? It's just so particularly old, you know, and horseback riding as well is thought to be tied up with this. The Proto-Indo-Europeans, they are thought to they were thought to be the first horseback riders, and it's thought to be the development of hemp rope enabled the, you know, capturing of horses and the domestication of them, and it also aided the spread of cannabis throughout the ancient world. The Scythians, who were the descendants of these Proto-Indo-Europeans, they spread cannabis use throughout the ancient world by traveling the steppes, which is this flat part in amongst mountains that just connected throughout the ancient world. And horses were the main way of getting around back then, man. They just barreled down there and took it all over the ancient world and spread it far and wide, along with the mythologies and stuff like that. Scythians are wound up with the history of Soma and Haoma as well. They were referred to as the Haoma Varga, the gatherers of Haoma, which is Soma in the Persian counterpart. So it's all really wound up, you know.
It goes way back. Yeah, I got that.
One second. Sorry, Josh.
Yeah.
My buddy Rob has a question, and he asked it before Chris started answering the question.
Yeah, it was wild.
About the horses. But yeah, go ahead, Rob, and then we'll get back to you.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
It's Rob Laurie.
I know who you are.
I'm well. Sorry,
it's not been that long,
I wasn't sure if you had your prescriptions on or what, but anyway. So I've been working on the constitutional challenge with the Indigenous angle. And in fact, I was referring to your work on the Scythians. And then it was funny because I said to Marcus, I want to ask Chris a question and so on. So you literally set the backstory of my question. And so I was thinking about this with doing research with the question of when did cannabis or plants containing phytocannabinoids arrive in North America, and then of course what would the cultural connection be with an indigenous to be able to show a lineage that hasn't been interrupted, etc. So that got me thinking, right? If you accept I don't know, a land continental crossing land bridge and a migration of the indigenous from parts of Asia, surely they all weren't walking. Some of them must have had horses because, again, horses were noticed in the New World well before white Europeans, including the Vikings. So my question is, would there be any possibility of a connection between cannabis, hemp, or other phytocannabinoid plants and indigenous North American indigenous, and then with the Scythian theory of using long grasses and hemps for saddlery, tack, and bridles to get to North America? Because if we could prove that, that could be evidence to be able to satisfy the Vanderpeet test, which is what you need to show a pre-existing Aboriginal right. So that may be the kind of missing piece in that holy grail of proving the existence of not just cannabis for med purposes or smoking, but the use of it. And so in the Scythian case, as you so rightly identified, was so central to their culture. And again, the use of hemp and long grasses for saddlery and tack and bridles kind of got me thinking. So I'll leave that there. Is there any credence or do you think any merit to that line of inquiry?
I was mentioned earlier about sometimes having to give up ideas that I was attached to. And, part of that, in my first book, Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana, and Magic Religion, which came out in 1995, I advocated for First Nations use based on Jack Frazier's book, The Great American Hemp Industry. This is a book that came out before Jack Herer's book. And he points to a number of bits of evidence of hemp cloth and stuff like that. And also there was claims about pipes found in Morrison, Ontario that had both tobacco and hemp residues in them. Unfortunately, I don't really think those really stand up to scrutiny. These things, the cloth examples, they were identified before a lot of chemical research, chemical analysis of agent materials was around. So they're not they're based on somebody's observance. Oh, that looks like hemp cloth to me. You know what I mean? And some of the early explorers reported seeing hemp as well, but they're not like trained botanists. They didn't, provide botanical examples. The pipes in Morrison, Ontario, that turned out to be a mistake of some reporter who misquoted the archaeologists, and so if there was cannabis here, there would be evidence in the ground in regards to stratus and pollen examples from ancient times and stuff like that. Other surviving artifacts, and I don't really think there is that now. In the Viking site in Newfoundland, which goes back to about the 12th century, they have found hemp seeds, so at least got there then. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of First Nations people embraced it upon discovering it. You know what I mean? And incorporated, just as we did it as well. But I don't. I haven't seen anything that I think stands up to real academic pursuits in regards to First Nations pre-Columbus use of cannabis. Not to say that it won't happen, but there's mummies in South America where they claim they found evidence of cannabis. You know what I mean? But then they found mummies in Egypt, which they claim to have found evidence of coca and tobacco in them. This stuff's all just wound up in debate and controversy, and most academics reject these finds. And so if you start,
I agree with you,
and you're in the position of having to try to defend stuff that's really, kind of you're getting on the edges, the Graham Hancock area of history. And I don't think we need to do that with cannabis history.
I absolutely agree with you, Chris, that there is no proof 100% of pre Christopher Columbus cannabis, other than maybe a little bit of Viking stuff that never really spread, because there's no remains of seeds, pollen, or fiber. And that's what
Rob,
you need for absolute proof.
Rob wants to speak, absolutely. And then Wade has his hand up, so we'll go Rob and then Wade.
clarify, hey, Skunkman Sam, just to clarify, the way that cannabis is regulated in the legislation, like if you read the definition at Schedule 1, it basically includes cannabis is all phytocannabinoids derived from cannabis and non-cannabis sources, regardless of process. So where that's unique is allegedly echinacea, which goes by another word, coneflower and kale, allegedly, you know, are similar, if not identical, phytocannabinoids
Now,
to
the endocannabinoid levels or the phytocannabinoid levels of echinacea, they're so low you can't get high from it. Maybe
But where
you could get
but
some
hang
sort
on, where
of
I'm going
medical
with all
benefit.
that, but where I'm going with that is for an Aboriginal rights argument, right? Because ultimately, with the way the First Nations were excluded from participation in the initial round of cannabis legislation, being able to prove, show, and that's where I think if we can argue this under, you know, because they've already proven Aboriginal rights with hunting, gathering, foraging, and agriculture. So ultimately, I look at this as a much wider, broader spectrum than just cannabisia and smoking it and using it for medical purposes. And ultimately, it's the government, federal government, saying, Indigenous, you can't use these plants unless you get a permit or a license. And in the case of cannabis, there is no federal license for Indigenous use of cannabis for food, social, or ceremonial purposes. So, I mean, there isn't an answer, but it's just the way that the law is written that may be a way to attack it with Aboriginal rights arguments. So again, very interested to have heard Chris's thoughts on all of this. And again, honored to be at Hash Church today. So thanks for having me, Marcus.
Yeah, man.
You know, I think that the creator, you know, gives plants, man. It doesn't matter where they're from. It's the creator, you know, and that should be enough for our First Nations brothers and sisters. After the loss of the buffalo, I think that extending that is a good place to start. And I just love seeing, you know, dispensaries on reserves, man. I think I'm just so stoked when I see it. I love going in there and buying it off of them. You know what I mean? It's like least I can do is give them my Cannabis when I can, you know, after everything that's happened over the millennia.
Yeah, man. So now, Wade, you had your hand up. We'd love to hear from you, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And what a great download, Chris. That was quite a journey you took us on. I got to jump in on the question of cannabis and the indigenous tribes of North America. I know a number of folks in the Native American church, and pretty much unanimously, they reject the idea of cannabis as a sacrament. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, a lot of like AA, you know, alcohol and stuff really took its toll on the First Nations community, and also a lot of like real biblical imprinting and stuff like that, you know. And I think there's been a tendency, not all Native American church members view it that way, but you're right. And this happens in a lot of ayahuasca churches as well, you know, where it's demonized, but not all, you know, Santa Daime, they quite embrace. Well, actually, the Santa Daime split over the issue of cannabis in ceremony and that, right? You know what I mean? And I think a lot of this is just like a hangover from Catholicism and that type of thing, where, you know, it gets lumped together with drugs and alcohol and all these other things by these groups. But cannabis has these people don't know about cannabis's huge, extensive sacred history. There's no plant that comes close to the massive sacred history of cannabis in Taoism, in Shintoism, in Hinduism, in Zoroastrianism, you know, it's everywhere, man. It's all over the place. You can tie all the major world's religions to some point in history where the cannabis plays a significant role of some kind.
That's awesome. Of course it does. That's why we fight for her.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, I think you could pick a lot of causes in today's world with the environmental and social upheaval that we're facing one thing I always really enjoyed about cannabis is how it affected so many areas of life. Initially, what drew me to it was the environmental aspects of it, as we're cutting down the loss of our old growth rainforest when so much of those trees are going to pulp and paper. And then, the social injustice of it, back then, man, our friends, people, I know people who went to jail for this herb, man. We're in jail, had their families ruined, their livelihoods taken away, man. That's really heavy. And it's all was enforced and brought about with racism, man. You can't get more racist than Anslinger, or what happened in here with Janie Canuck, and how foreign cultures were the source of demonization of these substances, and then medically, man, like a parent with a child with epilepsy, it's a miracle for them, man. You know what I mean? Or you have brain cancer and it shrinks your tumor. That's a freaking miracle, man. And so, it goes beyond all that. And I think it's beyond, I've come to see that it's beyond any sort of religious right. This is a basic human right, man. We're talking about life on earth, dirt, air, water, plants. Basic human rights, man. And this goes far beyond religious uses. This is our heritage, man. This is worth fighting for. And I feel like right now, man, even this election, we could go two ways. We can go the way of the Koch brothers and big oil and Trump, or we can start moving towards greener energy, man, and alternative energy and greening up the planet, you know what I mean? And moving away from these dead religions, man. What's Catholicism got to offer? It's like, man, it's big part of the problem that we're all in right now. And you take a look in the Mideast and stuff like that, it's a mess, man. Everybody could use a little more herb, man. More people smoke ganja, more we see world peace, just like Bob Marley said.
Yes. Amen, brother.
We'll just fight over the weed.
Amen. It's good to see you, dude. It's good to listen to you and feel your passion and feel your energy, because you got a great energy, man. It's intense and passionate, and it's authentic.
Miss you, man. You got to come back to the West Coast, Chris.
I was feeling a little bummed out before I left BC. I'd had a bad experience at Soma Institute, the retreat I was trying to send, and some guy tried to help, just totally ratted me out and killed it all, and so much of the plant medicine scene had been infiltrated by QAnon and pandemic mentality. I was just, man, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I just thought, man, last time I was having fun when I was a surfer, and I just sold everything and kind of came out here. But on my way through, I lost my cat for a night, and I was living in a van with my dog, my wife, my cat, my parrot, driving around for 6 months, and I lost my cat for the night. And I was just figured that was it. We're downtown Vancouver, camping in the van, and the cat's out. And I figured that was it. And I said, Shiva, you give me my cat back and I'll write another fucking book, And then the next morning, my cat was at my van, and I was like, shit. I wasn't even going to write another book. But after that, my own superstition kind of drove me to do it. You know what I mean? And so I fulfilled that. But, I've been feeling a little more helpful. It's nice to see the American election turning around a little bit and stuff, but it's pretty freaky in the world right now, and it could go either way.
Yeah, it's a scary world for sure. You're talking about your cat that used to open your refrigerator door?
Oh yeah, that bastard. He's like a savage. It's like a love-hate relationship. He's tried to kill me a few times.
I go over to his house. He's got a 2x4 wedging his refrigerator door closed. I'm like, what's this all about? He's like, the fucking cat is opening up the fridge, but he doesn't close it.
Yeah, Shankar is way smart. Oh my god. Say hi to Shankar and Selena. And
I will, yeah.
The whole family.
Yeah.
That's what's up. Well, we're going to take off here in a little bit ourselves, but I'm glad we managed to get a couple of hours of church in, and I'm really glad you were able to come on, and I hope you'll join us again here sooner than later.
Yes.
It's as always just a pleasure, dude. Fuck.
Well, you got to come to the East Coast and do some surfing, man.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Like I said, you're one of those dudes that I did other things with from the cannabis industry, and you got me into electric skateboarding, and I'm still into it. I do have a broken clavicle right now from skateboarding at the Whistler Skate Park recently.
Oh, man.
That was
the injuries in the electric skateboarding. I got a lot of injuries, man. I haven't been doing this. Afraid of missing
handlebars. Knock on wood, I haven't hurt myself on my electric skateboard. It was the other silly skateboard, the original, with the little wheels and stuff that I I just destroyed myself on it. Not to, well, 4 weeks ago. I broke my arm 4 weeks ago, so I'm just
man,
kind of
sorry
coming
to
out of
hear.
it. But
yeah, the
yeah,
one wheel
it's
was bad for that. I landed on my shoulder like half a dozen times, and I'm like 220, getting catapulted off that thing, bam, and it was just like hurt me for like a year, man.
Jesus. Yeah. Well,
Pain.
let's wish everyone, as I'm itching my itchy broken bone hump on my arm.
Sorry to
right
hear,
now.
brother.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone from Skunkman Sam and Etienne and Corey from Sample Automation and Dr. Mark and Wade Laughter and Dutch and Chris Bennett. Dr. Arturo, sorry again, we're cutting us off here too soon. We didn't get to hear from you, but we got to get you in earlier next Sunday so we can hear from you, and just appreciate everyone who's watching live. I think we have, I don't know, 200 or 300 people watching live right now. So we appreciate that. And we'll be back next week. Thanks to Rob Laurie for letting me use his room for Hash Church. Thanks to Selena for just being awesome, but also picking me up at the airport in Edmonton and driving me in with good conversation. So may the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later, everyone. We will see you next Sunday. Peace out.
Cheers.
Ciao for now.
Big love. Big love.
Hi, everybody.
Much love, everybody.
Outtakes.
That fucking guy.